Hi, welcome back. Today we're going to talk about the British horror film Crucible of Terror. Real quick before we talk about this, the way the YouTube algorithm works, I made the mistake of not putting up any content for like almost a month, and so YouTube stopped pushing my videos and it made my daily views drop from about 4,000 to like 10. So if you want to interact with the video by liking it or anything like that, that would be cool. Anyway, let's talk about this movie. So, Crucible of Terror, fairly obscure. Couldn't even find an exact release date for it, but I did find it came out in October. So, it features Michael Raven, who is this man here. Michael Raven was in Lust for a Vampire. He was also in I, Monster. All three of those movies came out in 1971. And I think he was a DJ on a radio station before that. He's really good in this, and it's too bad he didn't do more movies. I think he did one more in 72, all for horror. And I assume he plays the villain in all of them, although I've only seen 2 of them so far. It was produced by Glendale Pictures that seemed to only do this and another horror film in 72 called The Asphyx, which I'll be watching when I get to it. And it was the first horror film released by Scotia Barber Films, British film company that released films from all different genres. But this was the first horror film. It also did The Asphyx, it did Psychomania, Horror Express. What else did they do? They did, I think, Death Ship. And yeah, so this is like the first one they did. The movie, I liked it very much. Considering how obscure it was, I thought maybe it would, be crappy. But most of the British horror films are not crappy, no matter how obscure they are. Although that one about the spiders was pretty bad, though. Anyway, this one is mostly filmed in St. Agnes, England, which is in Cornwall, which is the southwesternmost tip of England on the water. And it's shot in what looks like a castle, although it might not be an official royal affiliated castle. But basically, an art dealer from London is just getting started, and he needs to buy more art so he can sell them art at art shows. And he has an acquaintance who has stolen a few pieces of artwork from his father, and his father is played by Mike Raven here. And he basically says that he's going to go back and bring the art dealer back to get more pieces of art. So they go to St. Agnes together, and they each bring their girlfriends. And so one thing I like about this movie is that there are a bunch of characters. We've got the 2 guys, both their girlfriends. We've got the dad here. We've got his wife, and then we've got their ambiguous butler assistant guy, and then there's a model that he is painting. So we have all these characters in this one little castle together in a remote coastal town in England. And in the beginning, we see something of what you see on the poster here, the hot wax falling down onto a woman. We see that right in the beginning. We don't know exactly who's doing it or what's going on, but we do assume that the woman is killed. And I thought this would be like a House of Wax ripoff type movie, but actually it's really not. There's not that much hot wax action in it, and there's no wax sculptures other than like one at the beginning, but it's not even a wax sculpture. He actually makes a bronze sculpture out of this woman at the beginning. Anyway, part of it feels like a slasher. Part of it just feels like a drama. A few people get killed early on, somewhat systematically by an unknown killer. It almost feels like a giallo, except nobody seems to know that anyone's getting killed. The people seem to be getting killed right before they declare they're leaving and so people just assume they're gone. So in most gialli, you've got, actually in every single giallo, you've got people trying to find out who the killer is, and in this one, only the audience is trying to find out who the killer is. Like a typical slasher, which didn't exist yet, but like the slashers to come in the late 70s and early 80s, each victim is killed by a different method. So before I say too much more about it, I'm going to give this one a 7 out of 10. The ending and the reveal were a little bit confusing, and the pacing, I think some people would have trouble with the pacing because people are getting killed at a fairly consistent rate for like the first half of the movie. And then most of the second half of the movie is really all about the interactions between the characters. So that's kind of an odd way of pacing things. But I liked it because I liked the characters. But I think a lot of horror fans would find it to be awkwardly paced. Then at the end, when there's a reveal, it ramps it up like 5 notches for like the last, 8 or 10 minutes. So I give this one a 7 out of 10. I would say it's worth a watch. It's on Tubi right now, if you have Tubi, which you should because it's free. So you can watch it on Tubi. And I would watch this one. We'll talk a little bit more about the plot details now. So if you haven't seen it yet and you want to, you can turn it off now and come back after you watch it. So as far as the methods of people being killed, we have the original, like, being turned into a statue. We have someone getting killed, bashed in the face with giant rocks. We've got, what else happens? Another girl gets hot wax thrown in her face and it like bubbles up her face like somewhat on screen. That was fairly advanced for 1971, especially for something that seemed to have a fairly small budget. I read that it allegedly had a £100,000 budget, but it seemed that experts were questioning where that money went because it looks like it's less. Although I don't really know enough about it to put my input on that. To me, it was cool. I mean, the cinematography was good. The acting was great. The special effects were like pretty good for 1971, so I wouldn't question the budget. But anyway, at the end... Oh, wait. One thing I want to say before I talk about the reveal. The character who is the son of the artist is one of the most pathetic characters I can think of in any movie ever, or any TV show, or anything. He's a total alcoholic, and he has stolen from his father. He does not have a good relationship with his father, and he has a beautiful wife who apparently like takes care of him all the time when he's drunk, and apparently he can't hold a steady source of income, and his wife pays for everything, and she just does everything for him, and he still like accuses her of like not respecting him, and he's just drunk all the time and like blithering and like basically crying. And the father here flirts with the girl, and like she doesn't give in to his advances or anything, so there's no reason for the son to be jealous. It's just kind of crazy. And then at the end, even though he has this beautiful, loyal, overly loving wife who just wants him to shape up a little bit, he hits on the father's model, the model who's there like getting her paintings done. He like hits on her, and then like doesn't even really keep it a secret. And then later in the movie, he ends up dying because he's like trying to hit on this girl at the beach, and the beach is real rocky, and she's like throwing like stones at him, and he's just like whining and crying, and like instead of just like going away from having stones thrown at him like towards dry land, he like walks out into the ocean, and she still throws stones at him, and this lady like totally dominates this fool. And then he ends up getting his face smashed in with like a boulder. So the ending, because you're supposed to kind of assume that this artist is the one killing people, but it never shows that. So of course I didn't buy into that. I didn't know exactly who was killing people. I was hoping I wouldn't be able to figure it out, but I always dance this line when you don't know who the killer is. I don't want to be able to figure it out, but I don't want it to be just completely out of nowhere and have it be some character that like you couldn't have guessed. I want the killer to end up being a character that makes me say, oh, that makes sense. All right, so so I was thinking maybe it's the butler guy because he seems nice and he's not in the movie too much, and he seems a little strange. But actually I kind of realized, like, all right, your first guess is supposed to be it's the artist, and it's not going to be that obvious. So then your second guess is obviously going to be the butler guy. And even that would be a little too obvious. So then I thought maybe it's the artist's wife who, kind of along the lines of Mumsy, Nanny, Sunny and Girly, or like The Baby, or like these other weirdo movies like that. She's like walking around carrying a doll or like a stuffed animal. Like she's got like a different like doll or stuffed animal in every scene, and she basically acts like she's 10 years old even though she's like 60 or 55 or something. And so I thought maybe it's gonna be her, but it's not her because she ends up killing herself like in the last 15 minutes of the movie. So then it's not her. Then I thought maybe it was the model, because it's like you wouldn't really think it's her, but like, who else is it going to be? So I thought maybe it was going to be the model, but as it turns out, and hopefully you know this because you've went and watched it, or you like really don't mind if I spoil it, it ends up being the art dealer's girlfriend who has no apparent motive to hurt anyone at all. And actually she feels uncomfortable in the castle, and there's one point where the art dealer goes back to London to get some funds to buy the artist's work, and she talks to him on the phone and begs him to come back. So you really don't think it's her. It's definitely a surprise. But then I'm like, well, what's the motive? Now the motive is absolutely ridiculous, and probably I imagine would be one reason why. I mean, this movie, according to what I read, was like pretty much universally hated by critics. I think that's a little harsh, especially considering I've seen like every horror leading up to it for like the 100 horror movies that came out directly before it. It's not like a ripoff. It's fairly unique and it's fairly well done. So I don't know why. I don't think it really deserves any kind of like panning. But anyway, the weirdest part though is that the motive is basically when she was like getting ready at certain points, she like wore a kimono, and the kimono used to belong to this Japanese girl who apparently was the model who gets killed and turned into a statue at the beginning of the movie. And so the kimono is possessed, even though there's no supernatural element in this movie the whole way up to the end. But the kimono is possessed, and whoever wears it gets possessed by the spirit of the Japanese model. Okay, so like that doesn't really make sense because there's no setup for any kind of supernatural shenanigans in the whole movie. But then to make it even like, I don't know, less likely or less coherent, or it makes even less sense when you find out that the kimono was not there in the house. It's not like the girl saw the kimono in the house and was like, oh, I like this, I'm gonna put it on, and then it like possessed her. Like that would actually make more sense. Apparently she just bought it in a shop, because the boyfriend, the art dealer, is like, how can that be? For some reason the butler explains it all. The butler explains it all at the end. Now, how would the butler know that? So basically, the girl bought this kimono at a shop, and the boyfriend's like, well, after the butler explains the whole thing to him about how the kimono's possessed, he's like, well, he said the art dealer says the coincidence of her finding this kimono is absolutely insane. She literally bought it in a shop, never heard of this artist, never heard of the Japanese girl, didn't know they existed. So you're telling me that she just like bought this kimono in a shop somewhere and then like it possessed her in the house that this crime happened at. Like, it's ridiculous. And then the like last line of the whole movie is like the butler guy saying, well, evil finds a way, basically, like, you know, like it was fate or whatever that she would find it and then end up in the house. So that was an unnecessary piece of nonsense. So that might be why some people didn't like the movie, like, overall. But anyway, it's fun and it's well done. So this is Crucible of Terror, and here's a little bit of a look ahead. There is also a British horror movie that came out like a month later called Crucible of Horror. So we're going to do that one soon. So this is Crucible of Terror, and Crucible of Horror came out like 1 month later. I think in November, Crucible of Horror came out. So we'll do that one later. They're completely unrelated other than that they're both British. All right, so I will see you next time, and hopefully the algorithm finds a way to get back to the track it was on. See you next time.